The captain's voice cut through the cabin like a blade. "Ma'am, stand up. You're in the wrong seat." The words landed hard. Christmas Eve. Engines humming low. A dozen eyes flicked up, then away. No one spoke. The jet sat idling on the ramp outside Centennial Airport, snow blowing sideways under the floodlights. Inside, the cabin glowed warm and amber, leather seats breathing out heat, the smell of polished wood and jet fuel faintly mixing in the air. Evelyn Carter did not move. She rested her gloved hands on the armrests, steady, fingers relaxed, as if the command had not been directed at her at all. She was 63. Her hair was silver at the temples, pulled back clean. No jewelry, no assistant. A charcoal coat folded beside her, boots planted square on the carpet. She looked like a woman who had lived long enough to know when silence was stronger than argument. The captain shifted his weight. Richard Lawson, mid-50s, broad shoulders filling out a crisp uniform. His jaw tightened, a vein pulsing near his temple. He was not used to being ignored. He leaned closer, lowering his voice, sharp and controlled. "That seat is assigned. I need you to relocate to the aft cabin. Now." Evelyn finally looked up. Not startled, not offended, just curious. Her eyes were dark and calm, taking him in the way a chess player studies a board mid-game. She glanced once at the empty aisle behind him, the half-drawn curtain, the muted clink of glassware from the galley. Then she spoke. "Assigned to whom?" The question was simple. Lawson did not answer it. He straightened, smoothing his sleeve as if resetting the moment. "This is a chartered aircraft. Seating is at the captain's discretion." His gaze flicked over her coat, her boots, the lack of anything that signaled importance in his mental catalogue. "You'll be more comfortable in the rear. We're on a tight departure window." Across the aisle, a man in a tweed blazer shifted uncomfortably. A retired engineer, judging by the hands. 2 rows back, a couple stopped whispering. The cabin had gone quiet in that particular way that meant everyone felt something wrong, but hoped it would resolve itself without their involvement. Evelyn breathed in slowly. The aircraft made a soft mechanical click as an auxiliary system cycled. Somewhere deep in the fuselage, metal settled against metal. She thought of long nights in windowless rooms, of contracts signed at 3 a.m, of the years when being calm was the only armor that worked. "All right," she said. Lawson nodded once, satisfied, already turning away. But she did not stand. The nod froze halfway through his turn. He looked back, disbelief flashing across his face, before being buried under irritation. "Ma'am?" Evelyn unbuckled her seatbelt. The click echoed louder than it should have. She rose slowly, not hurried, not defiant, just deliberate. For a brief second, they were eye to eye. His breath smelled faintly of mint. His pupils were tight. He expected apology. Or fear. Instead, she stepped past him into the aisle, picked up her folded coat, and walked toward the rear without another word. The curtain brushed her shoulder as she passed. The aft cabin was dimmer, narrower. A divan seat ran along the wall, legal, functional, less ceremonial. She sat, laying her coat across her lap, and closed her eyes as the engines spooled a fraction higher. The plane vibrated, eager. From the cockpit, Lawson exhaled, tension bleeding out of his posture. He had won, or thought he had. Behind the curtain, First Officer Michael Reeves watched the exchange through the narrow gap. 32. Freshly pressed uniform. The kind of face that still believed rules mattered because he had not yet seen how often they were bent. His fingers hovered over the tablet in his lap, the digital manifest glowing faintly. He scrolled once, then again. 1 principal passenger listed. No updates. No secondary names. He frowned. "Captain," Michael said carefully over the intercom, keeping his tone neutral, respectful. "Just confirming." No changes to the manifest came through dispatch. Lawson did not turn. He was adjusting his headset, eyes forward. "I've got it handled." Michael hesitated. His training told him to push. His instincts told him to watch. The cabin door opened. Cold rushed in, sharp and clean, carrying the smell of snow and tarmac. A woman stepped aboard, laughter already in her voice, boots tapping confidently. "I still can't believe you pulled this off," she said, brushing past the flight attendant. "On Christmas Eve." Linda Parker, late 40s, well-dressed, perfect hair. She moved like someone accustomed to being accommodated. Her eyes swept the cabin, landed briefly on the front seats, then drifted away, uninterested. Lawson's entire demeanor changed. Shoulders loosened, smile bloomed. He took her coat, kissed her cheek. "Told you I'd take care of it." Linda glanced toward the back, noticing the drawn curtain. "We alone?" "For all practical purposes," he said. "Let's get out of this weather." Behind the curtain, Evelyn listened. She did not look. She did not need to. Michael watched Linda settle into the forward cabin, saw Lawson's hand linger on her shoulder a beat too long. He looked back down at the manifest. His jaw set. He opened the flight log and began typing, slow and precise, recording what he saw, what he heard, the time to the minute. Not accusation, just fact. The jet began to taxi. Snow streaked past the windows like static. The runway lights blurred into white lines, stretching, converging. Evelyn felt the familiar pull in her chest as the engines climbed in pitch, felt the floor press up as the aircraft gathered speed. Lift. Smooth and clean. The ground falling away. She opened her eyes. Through the narrow gap in the curtain, she could see the reflection of the forward cabin lights on polished wood. Glass clinked. Laughter rose, easy, careless. Someone had already poured a drink. Evelyn closed her fingers around the edge of her coat. Not tight, just enough to feel something solid. Her mind moved, not to anger, but to patterns, to questions. Why tonight? Why this confidence? How many times before? She reached into her pocket and turned her phone on without looking at the screen. No signal yet. That was fine. There would be time. Up front, Michael adjusted their climb rate, eyes flicking between instruments and the weather display. A band of turbulence shimmered ahead, pale yellow on the screen. Manageable. He glanced once more at the manifest, then at the closed curtain, a faint crease forming between his brows. Somewhere between the ground and the clouds, lines had been crossed. He could feel it. The kind that did not announce themselves with alarms or lights, only with a quiet wrongness that settled in the gut. The jet leveled, engines easing into a steady roar. Christmas Eve stretched out ahead of them, long and dark. No one on board knew yet that this flight would not end the way it was supposed to. Not the captain, not his guest, not even the young first officer with his careful notes. Evelyn did. She sat alone in the dim cabin, the hum of the aircraft wrapping around her like a held breath, and waited. The first hint that something was wrong came quietly, not an alarm, not a shout, just a subtle vibration that didn't belong. Evelyn felt it through the divan before she heard it, a faint tremor under the steady hum, like a glass rattling on a table miles away. The jet was cruising now, lights dimmed, cabin settled into that false calm people trusted too easily. She opened her eyes and listened. The sound was still there, intermittent, wrong. Up front, Michael Reeves noticed it too. His hand froze mid-adjustment, fingers hovering above the trim. The engine gauges looked normal at a glance, but experience had taught him never to trust a glance. He leaned closer, eyes narrowing, scanning numbers the way a doctor reads a monitor. Everything was within limits. Barely. One needle quivered, then steadied. "Captain," he said evenly, "you feel that?" Lawson didn't look up. He was standing, not in his seat, jacket off, sleeves rolled, pouring another drink at the forward credenza like the cockpit was someone else's responsibility. "It's winter air. She's riding a little rough, nothing unusual." Michael held his gaze for a beat longer than protocol recommended. Lawson finally turned, irritation flickering. "Problem?" "No, sir," Michael said. Then, after a pause that cost him something, "Just noting it." Lawson waved him off and walked back toward the cabin. His shoes made no effort to be quiet. The curtain shifted as he pushed through. Evelyn saw his shadow before she saw him. Tall, confident, moving with the casual ownership of someone who believed the space belonged to him. "You settled back here?" Lawson said, voice edged with forced politeness. "Good. We won't be long." Evelyn looked up. "How long is the flight?" "Couple of hours," he said, weather permitting. She studied his face. The faint sheen of alcohol at the corner of his mouth. The way his eyes slid away from hers a second too quickly. "You've flown this route before," she said, not a question. "Plenty," he replied. "You worried?" "No," Evelyn said. "Just listening." Lawson snorted softly. "Well, relax. You're safe." The word hung between them, heavier than he intended. He turned and left without waiting for a response. From the forward cabin, Linda's laughter rose again, louder now, buoyed by champagne and altitude. "You always do this," she teased. "Act like you own the sky." Michael watched the captain disappear aft on the cockpit camera feed. His jaw tightened. He keyed the intercom, then stopped. Instead, he opened the maintenance page on his display, pulling up recent logs. He scrolled faster now, pulse ticking up. Inspections signed off. Dates close together. Too close. He felt a cold pressure behind his eyes. Behind the curtain, Evelyn shifted, adjusting her seatbelt. The vibration came again, stronger this time. A low shudder that rolled through the cabin and faded. She closed her eyes, letting memory surface uninvited. A younger version of herself in a rented Cessna, hands sweating on the yoke, her instructor's voice calm beside her. "Trust the plane, but trust your instincts more." Her phone buzzed once. Signal had found her. She did not look at the screen yet. She waited, counting her breath, listening to the engines, to the rhythm beneath the noise. When she finally glanced down, the message header alone told her enough. Michael Reeves had just logged an anomaly. Up front, a warning light blinked, then went dark. Michael's heart skipped. He leaned forward, eyes locked on the panel. "Captain," he said, louder now. "I just got a transient alert on the auxiliary system." Lawson sighed, setting his glass down harder than necessary. "We're at cruise. These jets throw phantom warnings all the time." "Still," Michael said, choosing his words carefully. "Procedure suggests we monitor closely. Maybe bring it back here until—" Lawson turned, his stare sharp. "Are you questioning my judgment?" Michael swallowed. "No, sir. I'm doing my job." Lawson stepped closer, invading his space. The cockpit felt suddenly smaller. "Your job is to back me up, not spook passengers." Michael glanced once toward the cabin door, then back to the instruments. "Understood." The moment stretched, brittle. Then Lawson turned away, returning to his seat, fingers drumming on the armrest. The vibration came again, stronger, sustained. This time, Linda noticed. "Okay, that was not nothing," she said, laughing a little too loudly. "Is that supposed to happen?" Lawson forced a smile. "Just some chop, nothing to worry about." But his hand tightened on the armrest. Behind the curtain, Evelyn unbuckled and stood. She moved slowly, deliberately, feeling the aircraft's motion through her feet. the way a sailor reads a deck. She pressed her palm to the bulkhead, eyes closed, breathing in sync with the engines. Something was being pushed too far. Michael's voice broke the silence, clipped, controlled, but edged now. "Captain, we're trending out of tolerance on the right side." Lawson snapped his headset on. "I see it." "Then we should," I said, "I see it." The aircraft shuddered again, harder. A glass clinked sharply in the cabin. Linda's laugh died mid-breath. "Richard." Evelyn stepped forward as the curtain slid aside. She did not raise her voice. She did not rush. But when she spoke, the words cut clean. "Bring it back under manual control," she said. Both men turned. Lawson stared at her, disbelief flashing into anger.
"Get back to your seat."
Michael looked at her, eyes wide, then flicked back to the panel. "Captain, she's right. The response lag—" "Enough!" Lawson barked. "I've got this." The jet lurched, sharp and sudden, dropping just enough to steal Linda's breath. She screamed, grabbing the armrest. Alarms did not sound yet, but the warning tone was close, hovering like a held note. Evelyn moved closer, steady despite the sway. She placed a hand on the cockpit doorframe, knuckles white. "You're fighting it," she said quietly. "You don't fight this aircraft. You guide it." Lawson's face had gone pale. Sweat beaded at his hairline. "Who do you think you are?" Michael's hands trembled as he adjusted settings, eyes darting. "Captain," he said, voice tight, "we need to follow protocol. Now." The alarm sounded then. Short, sharp, undeniable. Linda sobbed from the cabin, fear cutting through the champagne haze. "What's happening?" Evelyn met Lawson's eyes. There was no triumph in her expression, only resolve. "You don't want to know who I am," she said. "You want to know how to land this plane." For the first time since she had boarded, the captain hesitated. And in that hesitation, the balance shifted. The alarm cut off as abruptly as it had started, leaving a ringing silence behind. The jet steadied, but only just. It felt like a living thing holding its breath. Michael forced himself to slow his hands. He knew panic traveled faster than fire. He read the instruments again, this time aloud, grounding himself in numbers turned into meaning. Engine parameters are stable, oil pressure holding, but the vibration is back. It's not atmospheric. Lawson swallowed. He had stopped pretending to smile. The mask was gone now. He glanced once toward the cabin, toward Linda, then back to the panel, as if hoping the lights would rearrange themselves into reassurance. "All right," he said, too quickly. "We'll keep her level and ride it out." Evelyn did not move from the doorway. She watched his shoulders, the tension pulling them upward, the way his breathing had shortened. Fear made people small. Experience made them precise. "Riding it out is not a plan," she said. Her voice was low, steady, carrying authority without volume. "You're past the point where ignoring it helps." Lawson snapped his head toward her. "You are not part of this crew." Michael spoke before he could stop himself. "Captain, the maintenance history." He cut himself off, jaw tightening, then pushed on. "There are gaps, short intervals between sign-offs. That doesn't happen unless someone's rushing." Lawson stared at him, incredulous. "You went into the logs?" "I did," Michael said, "because something felt off. And now it is." The aircraft shuddered again, longer this time, a deep vibration that rolled through the frame. Somewhere aft, a panel rattled. Linda cried out. No words, just sound, raw and frightened. Evelyn stepped fully into the cockpit. She did not ask permission. She placed herself just behind Michael's shoulder, careful not to touch anything, her presence a weight rather than an intrusion. You've been pushing the inspection windows, she said, not accusing, simply stating. You've been flying on borrowed margin. Lawson's mouth opened, then closed. His eyes darted, calculating. You don't know what you're talking about. Evelyn's gaze softened, just slightly. I do. Michael glanced at her, confusion and something like hope flickering across his face. Captain, he said again, more firmly now, we need to consider diverting. The nearest suitable field is Des Moines. Runway length is adequate. Weather is clear. Lawson hesitated. The idea of diverting meant explanations, paperwork, questions. It meant eyes he could not charm and systems he could not bend. He shook his head. We're fine. We're halfway already. The vibrations surged, sharper, followed by a warning chime that did not stop this time. The panel lit up in amber, then red. Michael's heart hammered. That's it, he said. We're done debating. Linda's scream pierced through the cockpit door. Richard, do something! Lawson lunged for the controls, his movements jerky now, driven by adrenaline rather than training. The jet dipped, nose dropping just enough to make gravity suddenly feel heavier. Glass shattered somewhere behind them. Evelyn reached out, not to the controls, but to Lawson's arm. Her grip was firm, grounding. Listen to him, she said. You are not losing control because you are weak. You are losing it because you are stubborn. For a split second, Lawson looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. Not the coat, not the age, not the skin. The calm, the clarity, the refusal to panic. What do you want? He demanded, voice cracking. I want you to land this aircraft, Evelyn said, and I want you to do it alive. Michael was already moving, fingers flying, voice steady as he called out steps. Diverting to Des Moines, initiating descent. Manual control engaged. Lawson did not stop him. The jet banked, slow and heavy, turning away from its original path. The engines roared, then settled into a strained growl. Outside, the sky was black and endless, clouds like bruises. Linda sobbed openly now, clutching the seat, makeup streaking down her face. You said this was safe, she whispered. No one answered her. Minutes stretched. Each second felt deliberate, counted. Sweat ran down Lawson's back, soaking into his shirt. His hands shook, but he kept them on the yoke, following Michael's call-outs, letting himself be guided for the first time in years. Evelyn stood braced against the frame, one hand gripping the edge, the other tucked into her coat pocket. Her phone vibrated again. She did not look. Not yet. This moment required all of her attention. The warning lights eased from red to amber. The vibration lessened, not gone, but contained. Michael let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. We've got her, he said quietly. For now. Lawson slumped back, exhaustion crashing over him. He rubbed his face with both hands. When he looked up again, his eyes were wet. I never meant, Evelyn cut him off, not unkindly. Intent doesn't matter at altitude. The runway lights appeared ahead, a thin line of white in the dark. The jet descended, the ground rushing up faster than Linda could comprehend. She squeezed her eyes shut, whispering prayers she hadn't spoken in years. The landing was hard but controlled. Tires screamed. The aircraft shuddered, then slowed, then finally rolled to a stop. Silence fell, broken only by breathing. Heavy, uneven. Michael leaned back, closing his eyes for one long second before opening them again. We're down, he said. Everyone's alive. Lawson stared straight ahead, hollow. He did not celebrate. He did not move. Evelyn stepped back, giving the cockpit space. She turned toward the cabin, toward Linda, who looked up at her with red-rimmed eyes and something like shame. Evelyn met her gaze, then looked away. Outside, lights approached, flashing against the windows. Emergency vehicles, officials, systems waking up to what had nearly happened. Evelyn finally pulled her phone from her pocket and checked the messages waiting there. She read them once, then again, then slipped the phone back into her coat. The worst was over. The reckoning was just beginning. The cabin door opened with a hiss, letting in a blade of winter air and the strobing wash of emergency lights. The smell followed. Hot rubber, cold metal, something burnt and bitter that settled in the back of the throat. The jet sat angled slightly off-center on the runway, engines ticking as they cooled. A large animal, finally at rest. Michael stayed seated until the checklist was complete. His voice, when he spoke, was steady again, clipped and professional. Engine secured, electrical stable. He looked at Lawson, waiting. Lawson did not respond. He stared through the windshield, jaw slack, eyes unfocused, as if the runway had become a screen replaying every decision he had ignored. His hands rested on his thighs now, palms open, empty. From the cabin came soft sounds, a sob caught and swallowed, the rustle of fabric. Linda's heels clicked once, then stopped. She stood in the aisle, hugging her arms around herself, face blotched and wet, hair no longer perfect. The champagne confidence was gone. What remained was a woman realizing how close the edge had been. A firefighter's voice boomed outside, muffled by the fuselage. "Flight crew, remain seated. We're assessing." Evelyn moved first. She stepped back into the cabin, her movements unhurried, the way they had been all night. She did not comfort Linda. She did not avoid her either. She passed her with a nod, acknowledging fear without feeding it, and walked to the forward bulkhead. Michael watched her go, something tightening in his chest. He had seen authority before. He had worked under it. But this was different. This was not rank. It was gravity. Lawson finally found his voice. It came out hoarse. "You should sit down." Evelyn turned. The emergency lights washed her face in red and white, carving lines deeper, sharper. "We're on the ground," she said. "I'm fine." Outside, boots crunched on ice. A ladder bumped against the fuselage. A silhouette appeared at the door, helmeted, visor up. "Captain," the firefighter said, "we need to confirm passenger count." Michael answered. 4 souls on board. The firefighter nodded, already relaying it back. "Any injuries?" "No," Michael said. He paused, then added, "Thanks to procedure." The firefighter's eyes flicked briefly to Lawson, then away. Linda sank into a seat, hands shaking. "I thought we were going to die," she whispered, not to anyone in particular. The words hung there, fragile and true. Lawson closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were bloodshot. "I handled it," he said, the old reflex kicking in. "I brought her down." Michael turned to him slowly. "You followed," he said. Not loud, not confrontational, just honest. And that's why we're alive. The truth landed harder than any accusation. Footsteps approached again, heavier now. A man in a dark coat climbed the stairs, badge clipped at his waist, eyes already taking everything in. He introduced himself, voice calm, practiced. Federal Aviation Administration. He asked routine questions, names, roles, conditions. Michael answered cleanly. Linda answered shakily. Lawson answered with forced confidence that thinned with every follow-up. When the inspector's gaze settled on Evelyn, he hesitated. "And you, Mom?" Evelyn met his eyes. Evelyn Carter. The name did nothing for him. Not yet. He nodded, made a note, moved on. Outside, more vehicles arrived. Airport operations, local police. The runway was being closed. A process unfolding, methodical and relentless. Michael felt a vibration in his pocket. His phone. He glanced at it, then at Evelyn, then back at the screen. A message from dispatch. Short, formal. A request to preserve all logs and recordings pending review. His stomach tightened. Linda watched the activity through the window, realization dawning. Are we in trouble? Lawson straightened. This is routine, he said quickly. Precautionary. I'll handle it. Evelyn spoke, her voice cutting through his. You should stop promising things you can't control. He turned on her, anger flaring, raw now that fear had burned everything else away. You think you know how this works? I do, she said. The inspector returned, tablet in hand. Captain Lawson, we're going to need you to step off the aircraft for a debrief. Lawson nodded, already smoothing his jacket, reaching for the familiar armor of professionalism. As he passed Evelyn, he leaned in, lowering his voice. You got scared. That's all this is. Evelyn did not move. No, she said. This is what happens when fear meets consequence. Michael watched Lawson descend the stairs, watched his shoulders stiffen as he spoke to the officials below. He looked back at Evelyn. They're going to pull the data, he said quietly. I know. And the logs, he added. Mine too. Good, Evelyn said. Linda stood, wrapping her coat tighter. I didn't know, she said, her voice thin, about any of it. Evelyn looked at her then, really looked. The mascara tracks, the trembling hands, the guilt warring with self-preservation. Knowing isn't the same as choosing, Evelyn said. You'll have time to think about which one applies. Linda swallowed. The inspector climbed back up, face changed now, more serious. Miss Carter, he said, could I speak with you privately? Michael felt his pulse spike. He looked between them, then stepped back, giving space. They moved to the aft cabin, away from the noise. The inspector lowered his voice. We ran the tail number, he said. The ownership structure is complex. Evelyn nodded. It usually is. He hesitated. Our records list Carter Holdings as the primary owner. Yes. He looked up at her, something shifting behind his eyes as recognition sparked. Are you? Yes, Evelyn said. The inspector exhaled slowly. Then we're going to need to adjust how we proceed. Evelyn's expression did not change. No, she said. You're going to proceed exactly the same. By the book. A pause. Then the inspector nodded. Understood. Back in the cockpit, Michael stared out at the runway, lights reflecting off the snow like a field of broken stars. He felt older than he had an hour ago. He felt steadier, too. Behind him, Linda sat alone, staring at her hands, the night finally catching up. Outside, Lawson stood surrounded by officials, his voice rising, then falling, his confidence eroding in real time. And Evelyn Carter, the woman who had been told to move seats on Christmas Eve, stood quietly in the dim cabin of her own aircraft, watching the system she trusted begin to turn. They moved her to a quiet room off the runway, a narrow space with beige walls, a coffee machine humming in the corner, and a single window fogged with frost. The kind of room meant for waiting, not for comfort. Evelyn sat with her coat still on, hands folded, posture straight. She had learned long ago that rooms like this revealed more about people than courtrooms ever did. The inspector returned with another man, older, heavier, wearing the calm confidence of someone who had survived many long nights in government service. He introduced himself slowly, deliberately, as if the name itself carried weight. He asked permission to record. Evelyn nodded once. Outside the glass, She could see Richard Lawson pacing. His movements were sharp, restless. Every few seconds he looked toward the door, as if expecting rescue or forgiveness. Inside, the questions began, not accusations, not yet. Timelines, procedures, who said what, who moved where. Evelyn answered precisely, without embellishment. She described the seat change, the absence of manifest updates, the casual way authority had been assumed. She did not raise her voice. She did not lower it either. The older man listened with his head slightly tilted, fingers steepled. "You chose not to identify yourself," he said carefully. "Yes." "Why?" Evelyn took a moment. She glanced at the window, at the snow still falling, steady and indifferent. "Because when people think they are unobserved, they show you who they really are," she said. "And because systems only change when they fail in plain sight." The man nodded slowly. He had heard answers like this before, rarely from people who could afford to avoid the consequences. In the cockpit, Michael Reeves sat alone now, headset off, hands resting on his knees. The adrenaline had drained, leaving a hollow fatigue behind. An FAA technician worked quietly behind him, downloading data, sealing components, labeling evidence with practiced efficiency. Michael watched every movement, his mind replaying the flight second by second. The moment he had hesitated, the moment he had spoken up, he knew which ones would matter. A woman from airport operations approached him, clipboard tucked under her arm. "You did the right thing," she said softly. It was not official. It was not recorded. It mattered anyway. Michael nodded, unsure how to respond. He had joined aviation because he believed in standards. Tonight, he had learned how fragile they could be when comfort replaced discipline. Linda Parker sat on a metal bench near the hangar, wrapped in a borrowed blanket. Her phone buzzed constantly in her hand, messages stacking up faster than she could read them. She did not open them. She stared at the concrete floor instead. The image of the runway lights burned into her mind. She replayed her laughter, the drinks, the way she had not asked questions because answers might have cost her something. A uniformed officer knelt in front of her. His voice was gentle but firm. "Ma'am, we're going to need a statement." Linda looked up, eyes glassy. "Am I in trouble?" "That depends," he said, "on what you knew and when." She swallowed hard. Back in the small room, the older inspector closed his notebook. "There will be a formal inquiry," he said. "This will not resolve quickly." "I know," Evelyn replied. He studied her for a long moment. "Most people in your position push for quiet settlements, lawyers, private resolutions." Evelyn's lips curved, just barely. "Most people in my position are tired of watching the same mistakes repeat." The door opened, and a woman in a dark coat stepped in, her hair pulled back tight, eyes sharp. She introduced herself as counsel retained by the charter management company. Her apology came quickly, polished and practiced. Oversight failures, isolated incident, commitment to review. Evelyn listened without interrupting. When the woman finished, Evelyn spoke. "Your company placed convenience above compliance," she said. "You trusted appearance over process. That is not an isolated incident. That is a culture." The lawyer stiffened. "We will cooperate fully," she said. "You will," Evelyn replied. "And you will change how you operate. Or you will not operate at all." Outside, Richard Lawson raised his voice. It cracked, then rose again. The officials around him did not react. They waited. Silence was doing the work now. Michael watched as Richard was escorted farther down the ramp, away from the aircraft. Not in handcuffs, not yet. But the distance mattered. The separation was real. The older inspector stood, gathering his papers. "For what it's worth," he said, "what you did tonight likely saved lives beyond this aircraft." Evelyn rose as well. "Then make sure it counts," she said. As they walked her back toward the plane, the cold bit through her coat. The jet loomed ahead, lights dimmed now, stripped of its earlier warmth. She paused at the bottom of the stairs and looked up at it, not with affection, with assessment, like any asset that had revealed a flaw. Michael joined her, hands shoved into his pockets. "Ms. Carter," he said, then stopped, unsure how to finish. She turned to him. "You did your job," she said, "when it mattered." He nodded, throat tight. "Thank you." Linda watched them from a distance. She saw the way people deferred, the way the night bent subtly around Evelyn without resistance. Understanding settled in, heavy and undeniable. Sirens faded, engines shut down, paperwork multiplied. Christmas Eve stretched on, quieter now, the storm easing into a soft fall. Somewhere beyond the runway, families gathered, unaware of how close this night had come to ending differently. Evelyn climbed the stairs one last time and stepped into the cabin. She stood alone in the aisle where she had first been told to move. The seat sat empty, untouched, waiting. She did not sit. She turned off the lights and walked back out into the cold, leaving the aircraft behind to the long work of truth. Dawn came slowly, grey and reluctant, the kind that made you question whether night had truly ended or merely thinned. Christmas morning settled over the airport in a hush. Snow pressed flat by tires and boots, the world scrubbed raw and quiet. Evelyn did not sleep. She sat in a hotel room a few miles from the runway, curtains open, watching the sky lighten inch by inch. The room smelled faintly of detergent and old carpet. A cup of coffee had gone cold on the table beside her. She had not touched it. Her phone lay face down, vibrating occasionally with updates she already understood before reading. At 6:15 in the morning, there was a knock. She opened the door to find Michael Reeves standing there, coat buttoned to his throat, eyes rimmed red but steady. He looked like a man who had aged several years overnight. He held a paper cup in one hand, offered it without a word. "Thought you might want this," he said. She took it. "Thank you." They stood there a moment, neither quite sure where to put themselves. Then Evelyn stepped aside. "Come in." He did not sit. He stood near the window, looking out at the empty parking lot, the rental cars dusted white. "They grounded the aircraft," he said, "indefinitely. Pulled all the data, maintenance records, crew scheduling, everything." Evelyn nodded. "That was inevitable." "They suspended him," Michael added, "pending investigation." She turned toward him. "Suspension is temporary." Michael met her eyes. "This won't be." A flicker of something passed through her expression. Approval, not triumph. "No," she said. "It won't." He hesitated, then spoke again. "I've been flying since I was 18. I believed in the idea that if you did everything right, the system would protect you. Last night..." He stopped, searching for words. "Last night felt like standing on a fault line." Evelyn took a slow sip of coffee. It tasted burnt. "Fault lines are always there," she said. "Most people just don't feel them until something shifts." His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then looked back at her. "They want me to give a formal statement to the board. Not just the FAA, the company." "You should," she said. "I know," he replied. It won't make me popular." She studied him for a long moment. "Doing the right thing rarely does." Across town, Richard Lawson sat in a different kind of room, windowless, fluorescent lights buzzing softly overhead, A metal table bolted to the floor. A paper cup of water, untouched, in front of him. His jacket lay folded on the chair beside him, like a discarded skin. An investigator spoke calmly, methodically. Names, dates, patterns. Richard answered some questions, dodged others. He spoke of pressure, of expectations, of how things had always been done. Each explanation sounded thinner than the last, even to his own ears. "You signed off on maintenance inspections that weren't completed," the investigator said, not accusing, stating. Richard's mouth went dry. "I trusted my people." "You are your people," the investigator replied. In another part of the building, Linda Parker stared at herself in a restroom mirror. Her eyes were swollen, makeup smeared beyond repair. She had scrubbed her hands raw without remembering when she'd started. Her phone finally lay silent in her bag, battery dead. She replayed the night in fragments, the thrill, the confidence, the moment the floor had dropped away. The way Evelyn had stood there, unmoving, when everything else had shaken. For the first time in years, Linda felt the weight of a choice she could not spin or edit away. By mid-morning, the story began to move. Quietly at first. Internal memos, calls between officers, legal teams waking early, holiday plans abandoned. The charter management company issued a brief statement acknowledging an incident, promising cooperation. It said nothing of names, nothing of causes. Evelyn read it without comment. At 10:30, her own counsel arrived at the hotel, coat still dusted with snow, tie loosened. He spoke quickly, efficiently. Options, timelines, public versus private resolution, risk mitigation. Evelyn listened, then raised a hand. "No press conference," she said. "No statements beyond what is legally required." He blinked. "This will attract attention. People will speculate." "Let them," she said. "Facts travel farther than noise." He nodded, making notes. "And the company?" She looked out the window again. The sun had finally broken through, weak but determined. "They will answer to the investigation, not to me. If they survive it, they will do so having learned something. If they don't, that is not my responsibility." There was a pause. Then he said, "You could have avoided all of this." "I know," she replied. Outside, Michael sat in his car for a long moment before starting the engine. He thought of his father, a mechanic who had taught him that machines failed when people stopped respecting limits. He thought of the logbook entries he would soon sign with his own name, his own future attached. He started the car. At noon, a message came through on Evelyn's phone. Brief, confirming. The investigation had widened. Other flights, other crews, patterns emerging. She closed her eyes for a second, feeling the weight of it settle. Not satisfaction, responsibility. That afternoon, snow began to fall again, light and steady. The airport resumed its quiet rhythm, planes coming and going, passengers unaware of the lines being redrawn beneath their feet. Evelyn packed her bag and checked out of the hotel. There would be no ski lodge this Christmas, no fireplace, no celebration. That was fine. In the lobby, she passed Linda, sitting alone with a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. Their eyes met. Linda stood, uncertain. "I'm sorry," Linda said. The words came out small, unpolished. Real. Evelyn nodded once. "Be honest," she said. "With yourself first." Linda swallowed. "I will." Outside, Michael waited by his car. He opened the door for Evelyn without thinking, then stopped, embarrassed. She smiled faintly. "Thank you." As they drove away, the airport receded behind them, a cluster of lights against the snow. The night's drama faded into daylight. but its consequences did not. Somewhere, paperwork would continue. Careers would end. Policies would change. Or they wouldn't. But one thing had already shifted. A woman had been told to move seats on Christmas Eve, and the system, exposed to the cold air of truth, would never quite fit together the same way again. 6 months passed, the way time does after something breaks. Quietly, relentlessly, without asking permission. Spring reached the Midwest late that year. Snow retreated in dirty piles along the edges of parking lots, and the airport returned to its usual rhythm, planes lifting and landing as if nothing had happened. But beneath the routine, the system was still healing, scar tissue forming where complacency had once lived. The federal courthouse in downtown Denver stood gray and immovable against a pale sky. Inside, the air carried the stale scent of recycled breath and old paper. Courtroom 4B filled slowly, benches creaking under the weight of coats and expectation. Reporters whispered. Lawyers checked watches. No one laughed. Evelyn Carter sat in the second row, hands folded in her lap, posture straight. She wore a navy suit, simple, precise. No jewelry, no entourage. Her hair was pulled back the same way it had been on the night of the flight. She had learned that consistency unsettled people more than displays of power ever could. Across the room, Richard Lawson sat at the defense table. He looked smaller now. Not thinner exactly, but diminished, as if the uniform had been carrying him all along and its absence had left him exposed. His shoulders slumped. His eyes darted to the gallery, then away. He did not look at Evelyn. Michael Reeves entered quietly and took a seat near the aisle, hands clasped, back straight. He wore a plain jacket, no insignia. He was not here as a hero. He was here as a witness. The difference mattered. When the judge entered, the room rose and fell again. Formalities followed. Charges read aloud in a steady voice that did not bend for sympathy. Falsification of maintenance records. Violation of federal aviation safety regulations. Endangerment. Fraud. Each count landed with a dull finality. The prosecutor stood and began to speak. She did not raise her voice. She did not dramatize. She told a story made of facts and sequences and consequences. She spoke of inspections skipped to save time, of logs signed without verification, of how safety margins shrink invisibly until they vanish. She did not call Richard a villain. She did not need to. When Michael took the stand, he felt the weight of the room settle on him. He told the truth the way he had learned to do it in training. Clearly, precisely, without speculation. He described the vibration, the warnings, the resistance he had felt when he tried to slow things down. "And when did you decide to formally log your concerns?" the prosecutor asked. Michael swallowed. "Before the incident," he said. "Not because something had failed, because it felt like it might." A murmur moved through the room. The defense attorney stood, smoothing his jacket. "Mr. Reeves," he said, "isn't it true that no catastrophic failure occurred?" Michael met his eyes. "That's true." "And that the aircraft landed safely?" "Yes, thanks to the captain's actions." Michael paused. The silence stretched. "Thanks to procedure," he said, "and to the fact that we stopped pushing past limits." The attorney's smile tightened. When Evelyn was called, the room leaned forward without realizing it. She walked to the stand with the same measured pace she had used stepping down the aircraft stairs months earlier. She took the oath, voice steady, and sat. They asked her about the seat, the order, the silence that followed. She answered without embellishment, describing not just what happened, but how it felt to watch authority operate unchecked, how easily systems deferred to confidence, how rarely they asked for proof. "Why didn't you identify yourself?" the defense asked again, as if repetition might change the answer. Because my name was not the issue, Evelyn said. The behavior was. She glanced briefly toward Richard then, not with anger, but with something closer to disappointment. He flinched, eyes dropping to the table. The defense tried to frame it as a misunderstanding, a personality conflict, an overreaction. The judge listened, face unreadable. When closing arguments ended, the jury left the room. Minutes stretched into hours. The courthouse hummed softly around them. Someone coughed. A door opened and closed somewhere down the hall. Evelyn sat still, breathing slow and even. She was not waiting for vindication. She was waiting for resolution. There was a difference. The jury returned. The four persons stood, voice trembling slightly as the verdict was read. Guilty, on all counts. Richard sagged. A sound escaped him, half breath, half surrender. His attorney placed a hand on his arm. It did nothing. Sentencing followed weeks later. The judge spoke plainly, of responsibility, of trust, of the unforgiving nature of gravity. You are not punished for a mistake, the judge said. You are punished for a pattern. Richard nodded, tears streaking down his face. He did not argue. He had run out of stories that worked. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered, microphones thrust forward. Evelyn declined to speak. Michael did the same. The facts were already on record. Nothing more needed to be said. That evening, Evelyn sat alone on a porch overlooking a wide stretch of land, green now, the last traces of winter gone. The air smelled of cut grass and rain. She held a glass of water in both hands, feeling its coolness, grounding herself in the present. Her phone buzzed. A message from Michael. Short. Grateful. He had accepted a new position with a company known for its rigor. He was nervous. He was proud. She smiled. Another message followed, this one from an industry group announcing revised oversight protocols, mandatory cross-checks, independent audits. The language was dry. The implications were not. Evelyn leaned back, closing her eyes as the sun dipped low, painting the horizon gold. She thought of the night she had been told to move, of the quiet choice to listen instead of speak, of how easily things might have gone differently. Power, she knew, was not loud. It did not announce itself with titles or uniforms. It waited. It watched. And when the moment came, it insisted on being seen. Somewhere, an aircraft lifted into the evening sky, engine steady, systems checked twice. Somewhere else, a young pilot read a log more carefully than he might have before. Evelyn opened her eyes and watched the light fade, feeling neither triumph nor regret. Only the deep, steady satisfaction of knowing that, for once, the truth had not been rushed. And that was enough. A year after the trial, the industry gathered in a place that prized quiet over spectacle. A converted hangar outside Wichita, Kansas, stripped of banners and slogans, filled with rows of folding chairs and the low murmur of people who had flown long enough to understand that survival was not luck. It was discipline. The conference was invitation only. No press, no live stream. Just operators, inspectors, engineers, pilots, and a handful of owners who had learned the hard way what failure really cost. Evelyn arrived alone. She walked the length of the hangar at an unhurried pace, coat draped over her arm, eyes taking in the details others missed. The uneven spacing of the chairs, the hum of a portable generator feeding lights that cast no shadows, the smell of oil and coffee. Men and women paused as she passed, not because they recognized her face, but because something about her presence slowed them down, made them straighten, made them think. Michael Reeves stood near the back, reviewing notes on a tablet, jaw set with the same quiet focus he had carried since that night. He had been flying again for 6 months now. Different company, different culture, same sky. When he looked up and saw Evelyn, he felt the familiar tightening in his chest. Gratitude, yes, but also responsibility. He nodded to her. She returned it. Nothing more was needed. The keynote speaker cancelled at the last minute. A logistical hiccup, the organizer announced, voice thin with apology. Murmurs rippled. Schedules shifted. People checked watches. Evelyn raised a hand. It was not dramatic. It was not rehearsed. The room settled anyway. "If you'd like," she said, voice calm, carrying without effort, "I can speak." No one objected. She stepped to the front without notes, without slides. The microphone squealed briefly, then quieted. She did not introduce herself. She did not recount the incident. She began somewhere deeper. "I want to talk about the moment before failure," she said. "Not the alarms, not the headlines. The moment when everything still looks fine." She paused, letting the words find their way. That's where most damage is done. When people feel safe enough to cut corners. When experience turns into entitlement. When confidence replaces verification. The hangar was silent now. "I've owned aircraft for a long time," she continued. "I've flown them. I've sat in the back. I've sat in the front. And I've learned that the most dangerous phrase in this business is, 'I've got it.'" A few heads nodded. Someone exhaled. Evelyn did not accuse. She did not preach. She told stories without names. Of inspections signed too quickly. Of junior crew members silenced by rank. Of owners who trusted reputation instead of process. She spoke of how systems rot quietly, not through malice, but through comfort. "In my experience," she said, "the people who save lives are rarely the loudest ones in the room. They're the ones who document, who double-check, who speak once, clearly, and are prepared to be unpopular." Michael felt his throat tighten. He stared at the floor, then back up, eyes bright. Evelyn's gaze moved across the room, steady, inclusive. "If you want to honor safety," she said, "don't wait for heroes. Build structures that don't need them." When she finished, there was no applause at first, just a collective stillness. Then, slowly, people stood, not clapping wildly, just standing, acknowledging something that had been said plainly and needed no embellishment. Afterward, small groups formed. Conversations took on a different tone. Engineers spoke more openly. Pilots asked sharper questions. Owners listened longer than they talked. A man with weathered hands and a maintenance badge approached Evelyn near the coffee urn. "I've been doing this 40 years, he said. "I wish someone had said that sooner." She nodded. "It's not too late." Outside, the afternoon sun slanted low across the tarmac. Aircraft sat in quiet rows, noses pointed toward open sky. Michael found Evelyn near the edge of the hangar, looking out. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know," she replied. He hesitated. "Why did you?" She considered the question. "Because stories fade," she said. "Practices last." He smiled then, small and genuine. Later that evening, as the crowd thinned, Evelyn walked alone toward her car. She paused once, turning back to look at the hangar, the people still talking inside. She felt no ownership over the moment, only a sense of completion. The next morning, a charter jet lifted from a runway in Ohio. On board, a junior first officer questioned a checklist item that didn't look right. The captain frowned, then looked again. They delayed departure by 15 minutes. No one complained. In California, a board meeting ran long as an owner insisted on reviewing a safety audit line by line. In Florida, a maintenance supervisor refused to sign off until a part was replaced, despite pressure to release the aircraft. Small things. Quiet things. The kind that never made headlines. Evelyn spent the following weeks at home, tending to neglected details, sorting files, returning calls she had postponed, walking long paths through land that did not ask anything of her. She thought less about the night on the plane and more about the years ahead, about what it meant to leave systems better than you found them. One afternoon, she received a letter in the mail, handwritten. The paper was cheap, the handwriting unsteady. It was from Richard. He did not ask for forgiveness. He did not defend himself. He wrote about time, about silence, about realizing how often he had mistaken authority for worth. He wrote about learning, too late, that respect was not something you could demand from a uniform. Evelyn read the letter once, then again. She folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer, not as a trophy, not as a reminder, but as a record. That evening, she sat on her porch as the light faded, the same way she had months before. The air was warm, crickets hummed. Somewhere in the distance, an aircraft passed overhead, its sound steady, controlled. Evelyn closed her eyes and listened until it was gone, not because she feared it, because she understood it. And that, she knew, was the difference. The story should have ended there. That was what everyone assumed. The verdict had been delivered, policies had been rewritten, panels had convened and dispersed. Evelyn Carter's name drifted through industry conversations like a reference point, then slowly receded. Life, as it always does, moved forward. But systems do not fail in isolation, and they rarely heal in isolation either. 9 months after the conference in Wichita, a call came in just after dusk. Evelyn was in her study, surrounded by quiet, reviewing a land use report she had been meaning to read for weeks. The phone vibrated, once, twice. An unfamiliar number. She let it ring the third time before answering. "Ms. Carter," a man said. His voice was calm, practiced. "This is Thomas Keller, Office of Aviation Oversight. I'm calling because your name keeps appearing in places it normally wouldn't." Evelyn leaned back in her chair. That usually means someone is nervous. A pause, a soft exhale. "It means we're finding patterns," Keller said. "And the people who built those patterns are starting to talk." Over the next hour, the picture sharpened. The charter company involved in her flight had not been an anomaly. It had been a node, a convenient one. Pilots trading on reputation, maintenance schedules bent to meet client demands. Inspectors discouraged from asking questions that slowed operations. Not criminal in isolation, damaging in aggregate. What unsettled Keller was not the fraud. It was the normalization. "We're seeing the same names appear across multiple reports," he said. "Different regions, different aircraft, same habits." "And you're calling me," Evelyn said, "because you think I understand how habits survive." "Yes." Evelyn did not agree to testify. She did not volunteer to lead anything. She asked for time. That night, she slept poorly. Not from fear, from recognition. In another city, Michael Reeves sat alone in a briefing room long after his shift had ended. A junior pilot across the table stared at a checklist, confused. "They said this was fine," the younger man said. "It's always been fine." Michael thought of his father again, of the first time a wrench slipped because someone had rushed. "Fine," he said quietly, "is not a measurement." The next morning, an internal memo circulated through several charter firms. No logos, no signatures, just language. Clear, cold, non-negotiable. Independent audits would no longer be optional. Crew members could bypass internal chains to report safety concerns directly. Owners would receive raw maintenance data, not summaries. The memo did not mention Evelyn Carter, but everyone knew. Resistance followed. Quiet at first, then louder. Some executives complained about cost, about overreach, about trust being undermined. Evelyn listened to those complaints in conference rooms and private calls. her face unreadable. "Trust isn't undermined by transparency," she said more than once. "It's replaced by it." Not everyone stayed. A handful of senior pilots resigned. Some maintenance managers left rather than adapt. A few firms folded under the pressure of scrutiny they could no longer deflect. And still, flights continued. Carefully, deliberately, with more checklists, more eyes, more pauses. One evening, Evelyn stood on the edge of a small municipal runway in Montana, watching a jet prepare for departure. The air was sharp, clean. The pilot walked the perimeter himself, hand on the fuselage, eyes on every panel. He moved slowly, respectfully. Michael stood beside her, hands in his pockets. "They grumble," he said, "but they comply." "That's how change usually sounds," Evelyn replied. A gust of wind carried the smell of fuel and pine. The jet's engines spooled up, smooth and even. No rush, no bravado, just readiness. Michael watched it lift into the darkening sky. "Do you ever wish you just said who you were that night?" Evelyn considered the question longer than he expected. "No," she said finally, "because then this would have been about me." "And now?" he asked. "Now it's about whether people choose to do better when no one important is watching." The jet disappeared into the clouds. Later, alone again, Evelyn sat at her desk and opened a new folder. Inside were notes, observations, names she would never share publicly, patterns she tracked quietly, not to punish, to prevent. She understood something now that had taken her decades to learn. Power revealed too early becomes spectacle. Power applied patiently becomes structure. Outside, night settled over the land, wide and indifferent. Somewhere, another aircraft crossed the sky, its lights blinking steadily against the dark. Evelyn closed the folder and turned off the lamp. The work was not finished, but it was, finally, honest. The snow fell softer that year, slower, as if the sky itself had learned restraint. Evelyn Carter stood at the wide window of her study, watching the flakes drift past the bare branches, each one distinct, each one temporary. The house was quiet, not empty, quiet with intention. A kettle clicked off in the kitchen. The clock marked time without urgency. Christmas Eve had come again, but it carried a different weight now, one shaped by memory and consequence, rather than spectacle. She moved through the rooms with an unhurried grace, touching familiar edges, straightening nothing that didn't need it. A year ago, she had been told to move seats. Tonight, she chose where to stand. The difference was not power, it was clarity. Her phone lay on the table, screen dark, no alerts, no demands. She had learned when to answer and when to let silence do the work. Across the country, a charter jet rolled onto a runway in Pennsylvania. The captain paused at the threshold, checking wind, checking numbers, checking himself. The first officer read the checklist aloud, steady and precise. No one rushed, no one joked. The aircraft lifted cleanly into the cold air, engines balanced, systems honest. A small thing, a good thing. Michael Reeves finished a shift in Ohio and stayed behind to file notes he could have filed in the morning. He wrote plainly, without flourish. He wrote because he had learned that the record mattered more than the recollection. He sent the report, closed the system, and sat for a moment, breathing out the day. His career had not become easier. It had become better. That was the trade. Linda Parker sat at a kitchen table in Arizona, a mug cooling between her hands. Her phone buzzed with notifications she did not open. She had told her story months ago, simply, without blame-shifting or polish. The attention had flared and faded. What remained was quieter and harder, the work of choosing differently. She stood, rinsed the mug, and turned off the light. Accountability, she had learned, did not require an audience. In Washington, a committee concluded a review with language that would never trend. It tightened standards. It widened reporting lanes. It funded audits. The vote was close. The margin mattered. No speeches followed. The chair closed the session, and people went home to families who would never know their names. Gravity remained undefeated. Evelyn poured tea and sat at the long table where contracts had once been debated into the night. The papers were gone now. In their place lay a single folder, thin, unmarked. Inside were updates, not for leverage, but for stewardship. She read them slowly, then set the folder aside. The work continued because work always does. But it no longer demanded her blood, only her attention. A knock came at the door just after dusk. Not a surprise. She opened it to find Michael, coat dusted with snow, carrying a small box. He held it out without ceremony. Inside was a simple model aircraft, hand-assembled, the paint slightly imperfect. "My dad built these," he said. "He used to say you learn respect by making something that won't forgive shortcuts." She took it, felt the weight, the care. "Thank him for me," she said. "I will," he replied. They sat by the fire, not speaking much. Outside, wind brushed the eaves. Inside, warmth settled. Michael spoke once, quietly. "People still ask about that night." Evelyn nodded. "They always will." He looked at the model in her hands. "What do you tell them?" She considered the flames. "I tell them the truth," she said. "That nothing changes when you win an argument. Things change when you change how decisions get made." Later, after he left, Evelyn returned the model to the shelf beside books that had shaped her thinking. She stood back, evaluating the balance, then turned off the lamp. The room dimmed. The house held its breath and released it. At a small airport in Montana, a maintenance supervisor refused a release despite pressure. The part would arrive in the morning. The flight would wait. The decision would not make the news. It would make the next flight safer. That was enough. Evelyn stepped onto the porch, the cold, crisp and clean. She looked up. An aircraft crossed the sky, lights steady, path true. She did not track it with worry. She tracked it with understanding. The world was larger than one flight, one night, one person, but it moved on choices made by people willing to pause. She went back inside and closed the door, the latch settling with a final click. The kettle cooled. The clock continued. The season turned. Somewhere, someone was being told what to do by a uniform. Somewhere else, someone was checking a number twice. Somewhere in between, a system was learning, slowly, how to honor the lives it carried. Evelyn sat down and opened a blank page, not to write history, but to keep a promise she had made to herself long before that night. To leave things better than she found them. To listen when silence spoke. To insist on truth when comfort tempted otherwise. The snow kept falling, patient and light, and the sky held. If this story resonated, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment with 3 words. Tell the truth.